Page 97, The Sponsorship Relationship, Developing It and Sustaining It, Chapter 4. Developing and sustaining the sponsorship relationship. Relationships require work. Most people have difficulty being vulnerable, learning how to trust and be trustworthy, and making a commitment. For addicts, these things are especially hard. Many of us did not have great role models when it came to mutual respect and kindness. In our addiction, we ran from intimacy, often shutting out those who cared most about us. Page 98. In sponsorship, we have a rare opportunity to learn from each other, teach each other, and care about each other. Sponsorship shows us how to work with others while getting to know ourselves. We can learn to trust. Naturally, the relationship is not always going to be easy. We are going to make mistakes, but we become willing to take risks and face those fears that keep us from experiencing rich and meaningful relationships. Through sponsorship, we can learn to live and love more fully. Quote, by sponsoring other addicts, I have come to realize that I do have the capacity to care for and even love others. I've been forced to see that they actually need me. They have chosen me to guide them through the steps. I know now that I have something to give, my recovery experience in NA. I'm proud of this. Close quote. Another quote. If being in recovery only meant going to meetings, I could go on with my life and not do any work on myself. I wouldn't really need any help. I could just go to meetings, hang out, and then go home. But that's not reality. I do need to work on my relationships. The way that my character defects, my shortcomings, and my belief systems affect my dealings with other people. I need to do a lot of work to become the person I want to be. If I do this without the guidance and support of my sponsor, I wouldn't grow as much. Without her insight, I probably wouldn't dig as deep as I could. Close quote. Another quote. I am well aware of who I was before I got a sponsor, an isolated and lonely person. My sponsor has helped to guide me in building a strong relationship with my higher power and in working the 12 steps through which I have learned how to address my addictive behaviors. My relationship with my sponsor is precious to me. I am grateful for her presence in my life. Close quote. Page 99. Sometimes the sponsorship relationship unfolds easily from the beginning. Both members feel comfortable with each other almost immediately and share with open enthusiasm. Other times, making the effort to get to know someone else can seem difficult or nearly impossible. Learning how to communicate well is one of the ongoing challenges we face along the path of our recovery. Honest self-disclosure and mutual respect can provide a strong foundation upon which to build this exceptional relationship. Frequent contact with our sponsor or sponsee may help us to open our hearts and allow intimacy to develop. Quote, I have found that sometimes sponsorship is easy and the relationship needs very little work at all. I have worked with a sponsee for 15 years whose vision for herself is always clear to me and whose understanding of the program has always been the same as mine. Sometimes I have wondered whether the work we do together is as spiritually important as the work I do with people who require a lot of time, energy, and prayer. And you know what? After years of drug-related dramas and hardships, I have learned that life is not always a struggle, that peace of mind is possible, and relationships that come easy are precious. Close quote. Another quote. In the beginning, my sponsor and I worked only on the steps in dealing with my problems. Today, because we know each other so well over the past 16 years, we can share about everything. It's like having a best girlfriend, which I never had in the past because I didn't trust women. Being sponsored has made me think of another person and has given me the tools to build a lasting relationship. Sometimes it's still so hard to reach out, but I know when I do, the rewards are greater than I ever imagined. Close quote. Page 100. Many of us have unrealistic expectations of what a sponsorship relationship should be. We may always want to have the right answer for those tough questions our sponsees ask. We may want to be the favorite sponsee doing the right thing all the time. Some of us will see sponsorship as a way to have the best friend we never had in our lives. These desires are not wrong or harmful, but placing conditions on what we want or what we think we need limits our possibilities and may slow down our growth. Staying clean and keeping an open mind often brings gifts beyond what we ever imagined for ourselves. Quote, when I first came to the program, I thought a sponsor was a superhero or knight in shiny armor who'd always come to my rescue. After I got a sponsor, I soon realized that, while my sponsor provided enormous comfort in times of difficulty, he's really there to help me work the steps. Close quote. A dynamic and meaningful bond between a sponsor and sponsee depends on a solid foundation of willingness. This includes willingness to walk through difficulties without letting fear or anger damage or destroy the relationship. Our sponsor may challenge us, asking us to look at something uncomfortable, or perhaps we challenge our sponsor, wanting something more or something different than we are getting. Sometimes the initial reaction on either part is defensiveness. We may even exchange harsh words or say things we later regret. As in any relationship, the courage and humility required to resolve these issues often take the sponsorship relation to an even deeper level. Quote, I wasn't quite prepared at first for how much sponsoring other men would challenge me to stretch and grow. I thought that as a sponsor I would be the one to challenge them. I openly invite the guys I sponsor to challenge me freely, admitting that I make mistakes and am fully human. But when they take me up on that, my first gut reaction is often defensiveness, hurt, or anger. At other times, I am the one who says something I believe needs to be said, and they get hurt or angry or defensive. I always try to be sensitive and respectful, but sometimes the thing that needs to be said doesn't feel very good. And maybe at other times I'm just not very loving and centered and say something hurtful that has me reaching for my 10th step. I've come to see these moments of pain and conflict as opportunities to gain basic relationship skills that I can apply later in my marriage or with my children or at work or wherever. I had to learn, sometimes very painfully, that conflict and anger between people doesn't have to mean rejection or abandonment. I lived in too much fear of these moments of interpersonal discomfort before I found NA. The sponsorship relationship has been the workshop where I have learned to trust the underlying love and commitment of other men in recovery enough to stay in there and have the difficult conversations. In almost every case, if I stay in there with love and respect, and if I get focused on principles, we come through these things with a greater bond of trust and mutual respect than we went in with. I've learned not only not to fear these times of challenge and conflict, but even to welcome them as turning points into a deeper relationship. Close quote. Both members must be motivated to work together, committed to their own personal recovery, and willing to learn more about the spiritual principles of NA. Whether we are the sponsor or the sponsee, this relationship provides one of our most basic links to the Narcotics Anonymous program and can show us how to live the solutions the steps have to offer. Page 102. Quote, it is imperative that I examine my motives whenever I agree to sponsor someone. Ego has no place in my decision-making process. With the guidance of my higher power and an earnest desire to help another addict, I am able to build a relationship based on unconditional love and commitment. Entering into sponsorship is risky. Sharing some of my most intimate truths can be scary. However, I trust that my higher power is in the midst of the relationship and will help me to share freely. Truth breeds trust, and the more truths we share, the more trust develops. The more I give, the more I get, and this process helps to sustain an enduring relationship. Close quote. Quote, why is it that all of my sponsees seem to have a crisis during my final exams in school? My solution during last semester was to record a simple outgoing message of NA on my voicemail. If this is a sponsee, go to a meeting, do your step work, and then call me. When they wanted to tell me about all the drama in their life, I simply asked them where they were with their step work. After the long silence, I told them exactly, do your step work and then call me back. I'm sure this approach wouldn't work for everyone, but it seems to have worked really well for my sponsees and me. Close quote. Another quote. As a sponsee who just started working with a new sponsor, I'm learning about commitment all over again. After being clean for over 20 years, I sometimes find myself being complacent and too comfortable. These are the times I need to get back to the basics, those things I did without question when I first got clean. I have to call my sponsor on a regular basis, go to meetings, and work the steps. Sometimes these things can be hard to do. The excuses that I'm too tired to go to a meeting or it's too late to call can get me in big trouble. I know I have to do the footwork. I don't want to go to my next meeting only to pick up a welcome key tag. I know that sounds dramatic, but isn't that what it's really all about? It's like the basic text says, clean time does not equal recovery. Close quote. Page 103. Staying clean, working the steps, and working with our sponsors do not exempt us from all the realities of living. Sometimes we come face to face with life's most difficult circumstances. Our relationships with our sponsor and sponsees can offer the support and understanding that we need to keep moving forward. We are all survivors, and we try to do the best we can. We find blessings here in NA that many people never get to experience in their lifetime. We have a common thread holding us all together. We share in the recovery from a devastating disease. Quote, I was recently diagnosed with an illness the doctors say will take my life within a year or so. Fear and panic washed over me at first, but then I felt a strange sense of calm. I realized the calm was my disease of addiction saying to me, hey, now it's okay to start using drugs addictively again because you're dying. I knew in my heart that I did not want to live my last days on this earth trapped in the horrors of addiction. I immediately called my sponsor. We talked, we cried, and we started to do what we have done for many years together, practice the spiritual principles of this beautiful program. I face my mortality on a daily basis by going to meetings, talking with my sponsees and sponsor, working the steps, and trusting in my loving higher power. You know, I always thought that I would be one of those real old guys who would stand up at a convention with 50 years of clean time, but I realize now that I have the gift of being clean just for today, and I don't feel alone. That is where I get my freedom." Close quote. Page 104. Quote, "When I was using, it seemed that my heart had turned to stone. I had seen and been through so much that I could no longer cry or feel, and I doubted that I would again. This changed for me when I was hearing my first sponsee's fifth step. She shared about being beaten by her stepfather, and as she talked, I could see her little body being hurt by him. Instantly, I remember being hit by my own father, and my heart broke open with sadness for both of us. Her honest sharing was the connection back to emotional life for me. While I cried, she remained dried-eyed. She was only 6 months clean, and the time for her own emotional awakening was yet to come." Close quote. Another quote. "My sponsee was on the third step when his girlfriend suddenly left him for another NA member who had much more clean time than my sponsee. He was devastated and stayed in a lot of pain for a long time. I was worried that he wouldn't be able to get through this clean or alive. All I could say to him was to keep trying to turn his life and will over to the God of his understanding. To my surprise, he finally reached an acceptance of the situation. He trusted that his God's will was best for him no matter how it felt. My own trust in God and the power of the third step was greatly improved by this experience." Close quote. As we grow in our sponsorship relationship, we become aware of the impact of working the NA principles. We start to see the results of applying the steps and traditions in our daily life, in the lives of those around us, and in how we see our place in the world. NA helps us to stay free of drugs, but soon we come to realize that growing in recovery goes much deeper than not picking up drugs. Page 105. Quote, "I've become less motivated by the need to be liked by my sponsees. By that, I don't mean I have become less gentle or loving, but that I've given up my people-pleasing tendencies. I can be more comfortable being honest, even when I'm talking with someone who may become defensive, angry, or hostile. I've learned how to stand up for my beliefs and to practice the spiritual principles NA has taught me. I now have more experience in giving guidance and direction to sponsees who are always trying to use the 12 steps as the basis of the solution. This, in turn, has helped me to be a more open-minded sponsee, better able to trust my sponsor and reveal what's really going on in my head and heart. Since I trust myself more, I've learned to trust others more. I can listen more open-mindedly to constructive criticisms, suggestions, and those old hard truths I sometimes have a difficult time seeing without another person's perspective. Today, I trust that my sponsor loves me unconditionally and truly understands me with a heart of empathy and helpfulness." Close quote. Through the process of working the steps together, we find that what can start out as a seemingly unbalanced relationship with one person doing all of the helping develops into a two-way street we hear so much about, with each addict helping the other. Some members will experience sponsorship as a loving and unconditional bond, while others will see it more in terms of the instruction or even discipline that it can offer. However our sponsorship relationship develops, we do our best to help each other. Quote, "The process of working the steps of my sponsees never ceases to amaze me. I continue to grow in my personal recovery because of the fresh perspectives their interpretations of the steps offer. Each time I sit down with a sponsee to go over step work, I get new revelations. The words on the pages of our literature seem to come alive and speak to me like never before. Sometimes it's as if I've never before seen certain passages or heard a particular concept or spiritual principle. I thank God for my sponsees and their contribution to my recovery." Close quote. Page 106. Another quote. "I became really upset with my sponsor when I thought he was slacking on his commitment to work with me. I kept telling him this over and over until he finally asked me to do an inventory on him. This was an amazing process for me. I wrote about everything, why I chose and why I stayed with him, what he did that made me angry, what I liked about him, and what was working and not working. Then we got together and discussed it all in a very loving, mature way. He shared that he had been in a similar situation with his sponsor and had to do the same thing. I no longer felt so frustrated and alone. By getting real and honest with him, our relationship was able to continue to evolve." Close quote.